Hi, good evening. We're going to call the August 17th meeting of the West Sacramento City Council, Redevelopment, Successor Agency, and Financing Authority to order. We're going to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'd like to invite our guests to join the council and the staff in the pledge. And tonight, we're very fortunate to have with us Boy Scout Troop 43, and they are going to lead us in the pledge. If we could ask you to come forward to the front, just in front of the microphone, and help lead the pledge. Yes.
Please join us in the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance. Salute. Pledge. On my honor, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
Before you return to your seats, Boy Scouts, if you would please come to the microphone and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Donald Andrus. I'm 11 years old.
My name is Adam Torrey, and I'm 11 years old.
My name is Dallin Kersey, and I'm 11 years old.
My name is Benjamin Huffner, and I'm 11 years old.
My name is Ian Glenn, and we're all 11 years old.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining us and for dignifying the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. We very much appreciate your participation here in the People's Chambers here at the City Council. The council did meet in closed session this evening to confer with our real property negotiator regarding the properties on 422, 424 C Street, and to confer with our legal, and no action was taken, to confer with our legal counsel regarding 2 items of substantial exposure to litigation, where no action was taken, and to confer with our labor negotiator regarding negotiations with Stationary Engineers Local 39, and no action was taken on that matter. That brings us then to item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. As is noted in our agenda, state law prohibits the council from discussing or taking action on an item that's brought up under item 1A, but it is an important opportunity for a public forum. We do ask that anyone wishing to address the council on this or any other item this evening to please fill out one of the yellow cards that's available near the front door and turn that card into the city clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer that we use to make sure that everyone gets a chance to be heard. And to that end, we ask that all comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart, and that flip chart simply indicates which agenda item the council is currently considering. As it shows right now, we are currently considering item number 1. We ask that the cards be turned in no later than the conclusion of the staff report on any particular agenda item. Once the public testimony or the council questions or comments have begun, we don't take any additional speaking cards, so please turn those in if you are here to speak on a particular item as soon as you can, but definitely by the end of the staff report. And then finally, we also recognize that for some folks, although clearly not any members of the Boy Scout Troop 43, speaking in public can cause a little bit of nervousness or anxiety. And so out of deference to our neighbors, we ask that there not be any boos or catcalls or actually even any applause or other demonstrations, and that we try to maintain a civil discourse here in the chambers. So with that, we don't have any requests to speak under item 1A, so we're going to proceed to item 1B, which is council communications. Are there any reports or communications by members of the council? Mr. Johannesson. And let me please note first that our colleague, Councilmember Bill Christoph, is out of state on vacation, which means he's visiting his grandchildren, and so not with us this evening. Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Yellow County City 2x2 met on July 27th, and the 2 items for discussion were the health inspection discussion between the city and the county, centered around motel, and I think the city manager will be coming back with a report on that, and then also the proposed county vessel mooring, anchoring, and sanitation ordinance. And then on August 10th, the Yellow Housing met. Aside from numerous presentations of events going on in the housing development, we received verbal report on the JPA formation, which looks like is going to the supervisors in October, and we'll know more then what the proposal is going to be.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Johannes. And Mr. Ledesma.
Thank you. A couple of things to report on. First of all, back on the 25th of July, since it's been a while since we talked, there was a meeting of the Yellow Habitat Conservancy. A few items of note. One is that we approved participation in a regional conservation framework. We were actually, it was a pilot program that's being developed, and foundations, I forgot which ones at the moment, trying to get to those. But a couple of foundations looked at our plan, were very interested in the work we were doing, and offered to fund some early work that would actually help fund our local conservation strategy. So we entered into an agreement with them, which is good news, because we've been looking for ways to fund that part of our plan. So we moved ahead and moved that forward. We also got an update on the plan. We're still tracking towards late 2017 as a completion date, pulling permits. We're having a little bit of issue with our agency friends, but I think we're trying to work through those as best we can. But other than that, everything at the Conservancy is going well. And in fact, we had a meeting just this week between the city manager, myself, and the city of Davis, and council member from Davis, Lucas Frericks, around the future of that JPA agency, starting to look at staffing plans, how the agency will begin to form. So again, that was a good meeting we had. And then later that week, on Wednesday, July 27th, was the Yolo County, City of West Sac, 2x2 meeting. Myself, Supervisors Vegas and Rex Road were also there. We just had a few items on that agenda. Most notably, we talked about, had a discussion on health inspections. We had an issue in the Bright area, trying to remember the name of the street, but we needed to get some staff attention to an area that was being invaded by basically a lot of birds and creating a little bit of health problem. So we addressed that, as well as we talked about the county's vessel mooring, anchoring, and sanitation ordinance, which is going into effect. So I think that's everything we had on that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ledesma. Mayor Pro Tem Sandin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two items to report. One is earlier this evening, the Sacramento Yolo Port Commission met, and we accepted a grant for a 2016 surrendered and abandoned vessel exchange award for $289,500, and we actually amended a contract with Global Diving and Salvage. And on July 27th, Up for West Sac, our executive committee met, and we received a report about grant activities and planning and implementation of impact and infant-toddler quality rating improvement systems. We have about $400,000 between two grants to continue the work on high-quality toddler and family child care programs in West Sac and in the region. We also had a discussion about Measure E that's going forward in the city, and there was a lot of support around the table from the members of Up for West Sac executive committee about that. Nothing formal's come forward, but there was discussion about possibly formalizing resolutions of support. That's my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have a couple of reports. I was in separate business at the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia 2 weeks ago, but as part, connected to the convention, although not a part of it, I participated in a panel on Art Speak at the Philadelphia Museum. This is two national panels, one at the Republican Convention, one at the Democratic Convention. And I was serving on it with Ben Vereen and Ben Folds, two nationally known artists, as well as members of Congress, around the importance of the arts and the role of the arts in economic development and in civic democracy. So we're getting the tape for that as well, so we'll share it with members of the council and the community as well. But it was both fun to do, but it was also a good opportunity to show on a national stage the kinds of work that we're doing in West Sacramento as a smaller city in using arts in ways that really leverage broader community improvements. I also did a session in Philadelphia on the College Promise nationally, but also the work that we're doing through Measure E on the College Promise here as well. So a good good recognition for West Sacramento's leadership in the nation on both of those two issues. Met separately with the Chancellor at Los Rios around the initial modeling and analytics for the College Promise work that we will need in order to build out some of the details about how that program might work. So we're looking forward to bringing that forward to the council soon to help to start to frame our conversation around the measuring implementation, assuming that we're successful. Last week we hosted, and several of us were on this, but the Urban Land Institute's Young Leaders Group hosted their 24th Cool Projects Bike Tour, which is a program that they sponsor to help young architects, planners, financiers, bank people, a whole range of folks really see on the ground some of the most interesting and exciting development projects and new neighborhoods and infrastructure that are happening in the region. And they chose West Sacramento actually for the second time. And we toured West Gateway Place, the barn, lots of our bike facilities, and other places in the city. Very impressive. This was the largest turnout ever for one of these tours anywhere in the region. Was right here in West Sacramento, so that was very impressive as well. Also last week participated on the State of Agriculture panel for the Metro Chamber and for the region as well. And tomorrow we'll be we'll be holding interviews at the Sacramento Area Council of Governments Board of Directors for the new executive director to replace Mike McKeever, which will be along with the city manager of Sacramento and some of the other key hires that are happening in the region, one of the major personnel choices that we have as a region to make. The only thing I'd mention, because it's not on the agenda otherwise, even though we all know about it, is the streetcar grant that was awarded yesterday through the cap and trade funds that the state of California announced an award of $30 million to the streetcar project. It got more funding than any other streetcar project in the state. There are only maybe a dozen and a half projects in the state funded for anything. And so this is a major step forward. It fully completes what we need for financing the streetcar capital construction. So there's no more uncertainty, no more like, is the streetcar going to happen or not? We now know for sure we're ready to go on construction. We'll start signing all the contracts and the agreements with the feds and others to be able to move forward with that. We actually have now slightly more money than we need for the base project, so it's going to allow us to look at some of the augmentations that we've been contemplating, including the light rail relocation on K Street, but also the two other ones that we had proposed, which were connecting light rail in addition to streetcar to Rayleigh Field, and also accelerating development of a second streetcar spur, essentially down into the Riverfront District, starting to be as the beginning of the north-south line that we've been working on. So amazing, excellent news for that project, for the city, and really a testament to our staff, who's done like an amazing, creative, tenacious work on this, the council and the councils before, who stuck with this project, and the voters of the city who voted in 2008 to have a small sales tax allocation, like $1 million or $2 million a year for this project, leveraging now almost over $150 million in outside funds to make this project happen. So a really significant victory for the community. So. All right, so that's item 1B. Item 1C is appointments to boards and commissions, and we have no appointments this evening. So we're going to proceed to our presentations, the first being item 2, which is presentation of a proclamation recognizing the achievements of the West Sacramento Little League 2016 11-year-old All-Star Team. First, is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
If only we had a tape delay instant replay that I could see so the motion was made by Mr. Ledesma and the city clerk. Who's the second? Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Sandin is the second. All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries, and the proclamation is adopted. I'd like to invite the team and Coach Kevin Griffiths and colleagues to the podium. The Mayor Pro Tem are going to present the proclamation from the microphone. So if the team would all come forward.
Have them come back around.
All right, so we're thrilled that the team is here to be acknowledged by the entire community of West Sacramento. Some absolutely astonishing accomplishments and sportsmanship and wins by this team and the coaching staff, and we're so proud of all of you as a community, as a town. All 50-plus thousand West Sacramentans were rooting for you, and you showed not just winning, but the best of our values and our sportsmanship and who West Sacramento, what we're all about. So we couldn't be more proud of what you've accomplished and what you represent in our community. So I'd like first to read the proclamation into the record. So bear with me for just a moment, but your accomplishments need to be recognized for everyone at home as well. So this is a proclamation of the West Sacramento City Council recognizing the West Sacramento Little League 2016 11-year-old All-Star Team. Whereas the West Sacramento Little League has been an active part of the community for 63 years and has consistently offered a strong baseball program where the youth of West Sacramento can learn and grow. And whereas the 2016 11-year-old All-Star Team consists of players number 9, Justin Andreotti. Why don't you raise your hands? Great, Justin. Number 7, Devin Carter. Number 8, Donovan Coleman. Number 27, Dylan Drake. That's not you. No itching your head right now. Okay, number 18, Drew Gears. Number 3, Brett Griffiths. Number 14, Michael Ivaner. Number 13, Jacob Mendez. Number 23, Andrew Sloan. Number 10, JP Smith. Number 6, Jake Tandy. Number 11, Jonathan Torrenti. Number 2, Thomas Vieira. Manager, Kevin Griffiths. And coaches, Tim Sloan and Kelvin Carter. Yeah, we can't proceed until you raise your hand. And whereas the 11-year-old All-Star Team became the 2016 District 3 champions, Section 4 champions, and advanced to the championship game in Division 2 Northern California State Championship. And whereas the 11-year-old All-Star Team defeated powerhouse teams like Antelope, North Natomas, Carmichael, Rockland, Redwood Empire, Los Altos, and Petaluma. And whereas the 11-year-old All-Star Team had just one loss in the District 6 tournament, went undefeated in the Section 4 tournament, and only had 2 losses in the Division 2 Northern California State Champion tournament. And whereas the 11-year-old All-Star Team traveled to Anderson, California to compete in the Division 2 Northern California State Championship tournament, where they held their own until finally succumbing to Pleasanton Foothill in the championship game. And whereas the 11-year-old All-Star Team ranked number 2 out of 281. 11-year-old All-Star teams who competed in Northern California during the 2016 All-Star season. And whereas a special commendation is due to the West Sacramento Little League 11-year-old All-Star Team for an exciting and hard-fought season. So now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of West Sacramento does hereby commend and congratulate the 11-year-old All-Star Team for their accomplishments and, most importantly, for their great show of sportsmanship throughout the tournaments. Congratulations, gentlemen.
I just want to add to the proclamation and the comments from the mayor. We're so proud of you, and we're so happy to see you in the chambers this evening, especially because we know that this is either the first week or the first day of school for you. So for you to all be here, you're honoring us with your presence. I have had a chance to meet all of you, and I shared with you that we're watching on Periscope, and so there were a lot of folks here cheering for you. And we're really proud. We love those jerseys. You guys look sharp. You really represent us well, and I know you worked really hard, and so I think for all of us, we're just so proud of you and look forward to watching you in the future. Thank you.
Why don't you all come around, because now that the council,
everybody
the
can
whole
see you
public
guys.
can see who we're talking about.
We wanted from West Sac Little League and the West Sac 11U All-Star Team.
They can't hear you at home.
That's from the West Sac Little League and West Sacramento Little League All-Star Team. We wanted to present you guys with the photo from the state championship and the medal that the boys won during their last game. do photos with the banners?
Yeah.
So, I'm sure most of you know the banners mean everything in Little League. Every tournament you go to, you win a banner, as long as you win, and hopefully next year we'll bring a few more with us. But this is, and the state championship was the farthest this team could go this year.
All right, wait, we have too many banners for just the two of us. Would Mr. Ledesma and Mr. Johannesson, would you? Great job. That's awesome.
Here. I got it. There, go.
Yeah, here's where the meeting gets boring, so, and a lot older. All right, with that, we're going to proceed to our consent agenda, which is items 3 through 12. Are there any items on consent that any member of the council wishes to remove, or any item for separate question or comment? 8.
Well, actually, 9.
9. Did you say 7?
Yes, and maybe 8, because it's related.
Yeah, but, okay, 8. Yep, okay. All right, so item 7 is consideration of approval to locate the West Sacramento Farmers Market at the barn for the 2017 market season. Mr. Ledesma.
Thank you, and I just wanted to, first of all, welcome. I think we have the new chamber president here, so this might be an opportunity for her to address the council. You know, I think part of this was to ask around, as somebody, I think when we moved this to West Capitol Avenue, I just want to make a comment on this. It wasn't an effort to bring some visibility to our Main Street and try to activate the Midtown area. So I understand the attractiveness of moving to the barn, and I really want to take the opportunity to sort of thank, I know city staff worked very hard to kind of make sure the road closures and so on, so forth happen, Yellow County Transportation moving yellow bus routes to make it happen. So I did want to take a moment on this. By no means make the statement, I'm supportive of this, moving to the barn, but I just want to make sure we keep as a priority is trying to activate our Main Street, which is West Capitol Avenue. And while this venture is a good one, we primarily moved it to this location to that end. And I don't see it as a failure. It's just a new opportunity we have at another area where we're putting a lot of investment as well. And it's becoming a highly visible place. So I just wanted to make that statement. Maybe the new chamber president might have something to add to that, or just to say hello to us on what the commitment is at the barn.
Hello, thank you, Councilmember Ledesma. It's really exciting to be in front of you today, not only with this proposal to move the Thursday night farmers market to the barn, but as your new president and CEO of the West Sacramento Chamber, it feels really good to be home and to see so many familiar faces up there, over here, and even in the audience. I can't tell you how excited I am to work with you all. And even, I'm only in my 4th week right now, and I cannot say enough good things about city staff and how incredible they've been with us even getting to this point. From the city manager's office, community development and economic development and housing, fire, police, parking enforcement, parks and rec, public works. Everybody's had a hand in making our farmers market successful, and everybody's out there every Thursday night from 2 to 8, if not later. And you know, in addition to new opportunities presenting at the barn, we really do see this as an opportunity to utilize less city time and staffing to make the farmers market a success. You know, one of the stories my staff told me was that we had some issues out in the center of West Capitol to getting power to, I think it was either the band or something of that nature, and Denix, our public works director, happened to be out there, and next Thursday there was actually a plug exactly where we needed it. I don't know anywhere else that we could do something that quick, so thank you so much. I look forward to your approval of this, and if you guys have any questions about the farmers market or anything else, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great.
Perfect.
Welcome.
Thank you. And on related, because I asked for 8 too, I think it's,
Still on 7, though.
Okay.
So
That's what
just on 7, I just want to, I want to concur. I mean, our vision for West Capitol Avenue was a joint vision that we shared very passionately with the Chamber, which had equal interest in activating the core, our historic core downtown as well. And we had a couple purposes, though. One was to create this common ground where people from all over the city came. And another was to, you know, in a more direct way, make fresh, affordable, healthy foods, locally grown, available in a broad range of the city. And when we began this, West Sacramento was not the World's Fair celebrated home of urban farming that we are today. And so we have actually, in our goal to try to create more access to healthy produce, we've accomplished that more through the Urban Farm Initiative than we could have hoped for with the farmers market as the central point of that. And so the availability through 5th and C and through some of the other urban farms in the northern quarter of the city, as well as the farm over on Merkley, there's much more availability and awareness. We're nowhere near where we want to be in terms of consumption of healthy foods, but we've made as much a difference through those efforts as we could have hoped to with the farmers market. And you know, I think we have, our staff and the Chamber both have put so much heart and commitment into trying to achieve our vision with respect to the farmers market on West Capitol Avenue. I think we all would have liked it to have been even more popular, but you can only brute force such a project for so long without having to, you know, acknowledge the realities of it from both parties. And so I think for me, the barn relocation it's bittersweet. I mean, if it makes the farmers, I think it will contribute to the success of the farmers market and also help with activate another part of the city that we care deeply about. But you're absolutely right, and that what we learn with the farmers market at the barn, what we're learning with our partnerships with Off the Grid, what we're learning with all of the other events and activities that are happening in the city, we must bring that knowledge back to bear with respect to this part of the core of the city, and not wait till January when we put it at the top of the strategic plan, but really to be, you know, so, you know, I hope somebody on our team is already on the job thinking, okay, post farmers market, what is the strategy in terms of activation on the West Capitol corridor, or in the areas where we've made so many public investments and where there's so much incredible potential for things. So thanks for raising these issues, Mr. Ledesma. All right.
I do have a question. Maybe it's, I don't want to bring item 8 up, but does the farmers market, this is separate from our days committed to the barn, correct?
That's correct.
So we still have our 10 days. I know that's the next.
Yes.
Okay. That was my only other question.
Okay, so that's item 8, which is consideration of the administrative policy for the use of the barn as well. So that was your only question?
Yeah, I couldn't tell which, yeah, that was my only question.
All right, I'm going to say now, though, I know we're working it through the parking issues with respect to the barn and the housing and Rayleigh Field. remain, critical to resolve, and it'll accomplish the policy objectives that the council laid out last September, including the winding down the use of residential permit parking in the entertainment zones. So as we continue toward that, especially now that the streetcar is fully funded. All right, item 9 is the consideration and award of a contract through California Multiple Award Schedule, CMAS, for the Oregon Romtech Incorporated Plumbed Restroom for Bright Park. Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to call this out. I think this is going to be a great improvement to Bright Park, a much-needed improvement to this restroom. So the restroom now is pretty dilapidated. It's been, I think, an eyesore for quite some time, and what this is going to do is it going to replace the same configuration, or what is the configuration of the new system?
The configuration of the new system, it's just going to be a 2-room bathroom. So it's going to be unisex. It's going to be a smaller version, mostly just to support the population of the recreation users in that area. Eventually, we'll replace the bathroom over on Todd Hunter with the bathroom that's going to be in the sports softball complex just north along over by the teen center. That's where the next bathroom will go. So this bathroom is just a smaller version.
All right, and this is, it looks like the construction is going to be spring 2017. When's the completion date, you think?
We should be done within 120 days if we start in March.
So summer, sometime late summer?
Correct.
Great, yeah, that's all I need to know, thanks.
Yep.
All right, then that's all the questions and comments on the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved, or second?
It's been moved by Mr. Johannesson and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Sandin. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Consent agenda is adopted. That brings us to item 13, which is a public workshop on General Plan 2035, drafted environmental impact report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of the council. Tonight, we're at an important milestone with our efforts to complete our general plan update. And so tonight, we'll be going over a summary of the draft EIR that will accompany the general plan as we move toward the finish line, and be bringing this back before you later this year for hopefully final adoption. So tonight, I'll provide an overview of the findings in the draft EIR, which is now out for public comment. We would certainly be happy to answer any clarifying questions regarding the document itself or the procedure to follow. And we are here also tonight to inform the community that we're seeking any comments on the EIR itself to be submitted in writing during the comment period, which runs through September 19th this year. Just a bit of background. The city's first general plan was adopted back in 1990, and it was very innovative at its time. It included the child care and urban design elements, which were optional elements in the general plan. We're one of the first in the state to do that. And we're continuing to try to innovate with our new general plan, which we refer to as General Plan 2035, incorporating many of the more recent planning legislation that has been passed. Some very notable bills have come out in the last several years. Many of those have listed there on the slide for you. As we're trying to get our general plan to be contemporary and to carry us forward over the next 20 years or so. Some important changes in our general plan, we'll be looking at adjusting some of the density ranges in our current land use designations. Given that there's a lot of overlap, we'll seek to consolidate some of our existing commercial designations and then add some new mixed use designations to help implement more recent work such as the West Capitol Avenue Streetscape Master Plan and the other planning efforts that we have done over the years. General plan has many objectives. Clearly, we need to be consistent with current state law and the new laws that have come out and passed, such as most notably SB 375 and AB 32. We want to make sure that we are continuing our commitment on sustainability matters and follow the sustainable community strategy that SACOG has adopted for our region. And then also as an implementation measure general plan, complete our climate action plan, which is very important for us, so we can do a significant amount of streamlining on that issue on future environmental review of new projects. This is a program EIR, so the analysis is done at a general scale, which is consistent with how the general plan is written, which is a fairly high-level view. This document is being set up to allow us to streamline future review and tier from it to the extent practical, which for us in our community with having transit priority areas and some of the other secret streamlining bills, we expect that to be a significant benefit. Some technical notes. This is important that the general plan and the analysis that's in here is not based on what's in our general plan now per se, but what's actually on the ground right now. This is an important distinction for how impacts are assessed. And we're looking at our analysis based on our assumed growth in the general plan because we are making some conservative assumptions and conclusions in this document in order to make sure it provides that foundation for future environmental work. For a city like ours that is growing and will infill and refill, there certainly will be some impacts that at this stage on a very high level may be significant and unavoidable. They are in these numerous different resource areas. I should note that for context purposes, some of these impacts are considered significant and unavoidable. To be conservative, noting that we don't know the timing or the exact implementation of some projects yet to come. So, some of these conditions at this stage, we really can't say with 100% certainty that they can be mitigated. So thus, in the EIR and the world that CEQA keeps us in, we will need to consider some of these significant and unavoidable. I provided some explanation on some of these resource areas in your staff report, and then there's, of course, a voluminous explanation in the EIR document itself. And I'd be happy to expand on any of these particular resource areas tonight, but many of these impacts are likely ones to be expected in a community that is anticipating significant growth over the next 20 years. Similarly, on a cumulative basis, at build-out of this general plan, we would anticipate impacts in these numerous resource areas too, as the community continues to urbanize and we, move in the direction that the course we have been on. Fortunately, it's not all bad news. Many impacts can be reduced to less than significant levels under the names of under biology and geology, recreation, things like that. There are mitigation measures that are included in the document so we can have many of these impacts, which are explained in greater detail, can be mitigated. And again, there's additional mitigation measures under the realm of aesthetics and air quality. Ones here, either they're policy changes or actually actual real-world implementation measures that we'll need to do, some of which we do already, such as following the Yolo Solano dust control mitigation policy and procedures. And we'll be needing to look at vibration now in the noise element. We'll have to be continue to look at biological issues. Many of these are ones that we look at and do every day on projects, today, both our city projects as well as private development applications. Of course, cultural resources and paleontological resources, another area where we do have mitigation measures in the EIR, and these will be ones we can carry forth to subsequent projects. So just overall on the upcoming steps, we're about midway through this overall schedule with the EIR being on the street, which is a major milestone for this effort. Once the comment period closes, we'll prepare responses to any comments we receive, and those will be included in the final EIR, which will be bundled with this document. And then right now, we anticipate going through the hearing cycle on the overall general plan with the Planning Commission and City Council starting in October, once we have the final EIR ready to go, with our goal of being here before the council for final adoption, hopefully by December. So for tonight, for anyone in the audience or anyone watching at home, we're requesting that any comments on the adequacy of the EIR be sent to the city. They can be addressed to my attention, or as long as it has EIR on the envelope, it'll get to me. September 19th by close of business, 5 o'clock is the end of the comment period, and we are very much encouraging everyone to get their comments in on time so that we can proceed with the final hearing cycle. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there questions? Mr. Tilley at this time? We have no requests to speak on this, are there? Mr. Johansson?
Yeah, just a comment on this. I think it's, you know, of course, the comments have got to be weighed in over the course of the public comment period, but it's really, when you look at the significant impacts and particularly those that are unavoidable, it really, I mean, it looks like the vast majority of this, if not all, are just because we're growing. You know, there's some issues, for example, we are in a floodplain. We have we'll have the flood protection that it's just unavoidable that that folks living in West Sac are, you know, we've got flood issues we're always going to need to deal with. But this kind of brings home a little bit, you know, when you start densing up the city, which, you know, some of the proposals, the proposal is to do in the next general plan, some of the challenges that we're going to have to be able to accommodate that. And last time I think we saw that was before the housing run up in mid-2000s. So this is an issue we're going to be dealing with as we move forward. I'm not sure if it's going to be this building cycle or next, but you know, it's coming. But I'm certainly looking forward to the comments and that we get on this.
Okay, thanks.
Other comments? Mayor Pro Tem Sandine?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Tilley. This is, as we all know, is a huge undertaking, and it's critical. It's a critical part of getting us ready to move forward with that general plan. I was particularly, I spent a lot of time looking at the alternative, which was no changes, and that was really eye-opening when you get to that chapter, because actually, if you actually compare it, the no change, to what we're contemplating moving forward with, there are actually a lot of refinements and some things that actually are less, we're actually creating some, in certain circumstances, some things that are less than significant impact by going forward, which could be a little counterintuitive, but I spent some time reading that. I just had a question. I know when we move forward with these EIRs, we are some things are formulaic and prescribed, or very formulaic and prescribed, but I couldn't help but think about, a lot of times we're doing straight line projections, and I was thinking about alternative technologies, for example, smart cars, because we're you know, when you look at, for example, traffic impacts, and you're measuring the kind of impacts we might have at intersections. I know that it just makes it more complicated to do this, but I was thinking about that. I was thinking about technology infrastructure. I was thinking about the ways in which we might look at planning and water with new development. And so again, I know this is formulaic, but those things were kind of on my mind about, could we possibly add in some other scenarios or some other kind of capturing what might be possible within the constraints that we work in to do this work. So those were my thoughts about looking at this initial draft.
Any other comments?
I will make a quick comment. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. David, thanks. This is a huge undertaking, and I'm reminded of the years when we could not move the general plan update forward because of budgeting reasons. So by way of process and kind of where we are as a city, it's good to see this progressing along. I know that by way of process, getting this EIR out, getting comments back is critical, because it's an interesting process, and I kind of put my planning commission hat back on. I think we looked at those early in the 2000s. You maybe stutter over the significant and how you mitigate this, and that process, and how you have to identify them. But as Mr. Johansson said, the purpose of this is just to make sure we are looking and evaluating those and making sure the public has an opportunity to weigh in on those as well. Some of these are traffic. I saw water supply is an issue that we are going to be dealing with, and most communities are going to be dealing with in years to come, specifically because we're hitting climate change and drought and so on and so forth. Those are issues we're going to be dealing with forever. So I'm not afraid of seeing those significant impacts and how some of them may be unavoidable. But it'll be interesting as we kind of continue to sharpen our pencil and look at kind of where we are in the general plan, where we will be in, 30 years, 20 years, and anticipate that. How is it we're going to start planning the road, the map to kind of get to that next place? We are growing. We are getting to a place where the density is, and we're following, I'm going to go back, because we are following the SACOG blueprint around how we're doing this. We're keeping to those principles, which means we're growing. We're part of the urban center, and that's a good thing. So it will be interesting as we continue down this process and watch and try to manage this within our general plan in a sustainable way. I think everything we put into it so far, I'm confident in and kind of how we're managing it. But I'm more glad that we're even having this process in the first place, because we haven't kind of addressed it. And so I'm glad I appreciate you bringing this to us. I know this is more about calling on the community and calling on constituents to take a look at it themselves, and I would urge them to do the same. So, thank you.
Yeah, this is a solid effort forward in the EIR. All the comments that have been made, especially Mayor Pro Tem Sandine's comments about what the alternative is, both in terms of this EIR, but also in terms of the region, right? So it doesn't help us to slightly save on emissions here if what we're doing is causing a whole bunch of development to happen between us and Clarksburg. We don't have to score that in our general plan, but they would have to score it in the county. It would be worse for us and for the planet and for asthma and for all those other indicators. And so there's no question this is a huge environmental improvement over the general plan that we have, because that general plan that we have is from a completely different era when there wasn't nearly that kind of attention, and we just didn't know as much. So it's definitely a very significant step forward. A lot of good work's gone into the document, and the environmental indicators are all correct. I guess for all of us, it's our first general plan, since Mr. Christopherson is here tonight. The first one generated a huge amount of community engagement and input and discussion and debate. This one, not so much, and including from us. And I've learned a little bit about this process that it's a frustrating enterprise. I think Mr. Johannesson, having been here the next longest after me, we. For years, we've been, when important or interesting issues or opportunities came up, we would say, or Charlene would tell us, oh, just do that we can do that in the general plan. Well, you want to have flying cars? Okay, we'll talk about that. When the general plan comes up, we'll deal with it then. And we didn't deal with that then, right? So the general plan is just not, rather than being a real aspirational plan, or even our best guess about what is likely to happen, because you're right, exactly right about the transportation system being dramatically different with even a small change in the number of autonomous vehicles or half autonomous Teslas or whatever. Those have gigantic impacts, but you can't make a general plan that way. So a general plan turns out to be sort of, what is your most conservative, least amount of uncertainty? Like, if nothing changes ever other than a couple of your policies, what would the world be like? Which is probably the least likely world that we will be living in. And so it's so expensive and such a massive undertaking to do, and such a huge commitment of staff time and attention and resources, that it is frustrating, because it could be so much more, and especially in a city like ours where we are constantly looking for new opportunities and innovations and trying to stay ahead of problems and all of that. So having said all that, it's a frustrating process. I think we've just learned how to operate within the boundaries of the general plan, but not let it completely drive everything that we do, because we wouldn't advance nearly as much if we had. So it's good effort, it's good work, and look forward to bringing it to conclusion. Now, tonight's all about the EIR, and I noticed the October to December sessions. Will we have sessions where we're focused actually on the provisions of the plan themselves and not so much on the EIR?
Yes, yeah, that's really sort of next step is we're going over the policy document sort of holistically. We've brought parts of it to the council and other commissions, but we need to start looking at it cover to cover now. So that's really our next big step before we ask for approval.
Okay. What would be ideal, I mean, this is, because we've been at this for so long, but what would, it might be a challenge, but what would be ideal is in addition to the documents that we would normally get that would describe what has been changed, what has been done in the new version of the general plan and the amendments, also what we couldn't do, right? So because of this long history where, a year and a half ago, maybe Mr. Ledesma said, we should be taking a look at this different way of designing linear parks. And you said, okay, we'll take a look at that in general plan. We said, could you take a look at that in general plan? I imagine many of those things were things you took a look at and you said, actually, we can't do it. It doesn't fit in the general plan, whatever. We need to know that too. We need to know, okay, we had that. We wanted to pursue that, and we thought the general plan was going to be the bucket in which that was accomplished. So in addition to the staff reports later on saying, the council, planning commission, and community said they wanted this, and here's where we put it. If there are areas, which I'm sure there are, that it wasn't possible to accomplish the kinds of things or dive into the issues that we had suggested, just to show us, show us what those are, so we can see the parking lot and then make a judgment if we both whether we want to kind of force them into the plan somehow, or more likely at least know we need to, if we still are interested in those things, that we need to find another way to address them. Any further comments?
No.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that brings us then to item 14, which is consideration of the National Endowment for the Arts Grant Master Plan and schedule and consideration of the art concept for the streetscape improvements in Washington. And I see that Boy Scouts have a lot more stamina than baseball players. Congratulations for sticking with us. This is our last main agenda item. Ms. Jacobson.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Tonight, staff is presenting an update on the National Endowment of the Arts, Our Town Grant scope and schedule. The Our Town Grant is a $125,000 award to a collaboration of West Sacramento, Sacramento, and the Crocker Art Museum. It's called the River Crossing Project. Staff is also recommending that council appoint a member to serve as a stakeholder for the NEA Our Town Grant Project. And also tonight, staff is recommending approval of an art concept to be implemented into the design of the Washington Infrastructure Project, which is currently underway with the Affordable Housing Sustainable Community Cap and Trade funding. So the National Endowment of the Arts proposal grew out of planning efforts that were going on between 2013 and 2015 in the Washington District. Staff was working with community stakeholders and the residents and consultants and other team members to develop a sustainable community strategy for the Washington District that was funded by HUD funds and local match. So the ultimate plan, called Washington Realized, was approved by council in early 2015. And the strategies in the Washington Realized document are intended to encourage TOD patterns of development and to create inclusive communities in the urban core with bicycle, pedestrian, and transit alternatives to car travel. During the community meetings, the community stakeholders, the consultants, the participants in the meetings, we were assessing and identifying the challenges and deficiencies in the district in order to create strategies that could address them. And during that process, early on in those community meetings, art was identified by the community as something it would like to see. So in terms of the project, we began to look at art in a different way, in a sense that we, as a team and with the participants on the team, we began to assess whether or not art could be an intervention in this district and in this neighborhood, and whether it could be used, in fact, to address some of the challenges that we had or to change the conditions or behavior. And what we determined was that art can be very important in encouraging transit-served development because it can really reinforce wayfinding for bike and peds. It can spark private investment or urban revitalization due to the public investment. It enhances walkability for the pedestrian. It can enhance security. It's shown that crime stats show that where public art is installed, the crime rate drops. It creates more of a secure environment actually by drawing visitors, more visitors to an area. It can indicate the forward momentum of a district, and it can create a distinct identity because over time, certain art objects can become landmarks in the community. As you're aware, the Washington Realized document included a park master plan which addressed the important role of art in regeneration of the district. And this graphic depicts the overall parks and art plan, and art features are incorporated in that document as essential to parks and circulation. So the plan is to create small urban parks linked through walkable streets that lead to the Riverwalk. The placement of the art and enhanced landscaping is proposed along E Street and C Street to serve as wayfinding elements to the Riverwalk. And additionally, art will be placed along West Capitol, along the streetcar route, connecting the baseball sculptures in front of City Hall to Tower Bridge, and also along the new bicycle paseo on West Cap. So the yellow asterisks on this plan indicate the art that's to be on E and C Street, which is more an intimate pedestrian scaled pieces. The large red icons indicate the art beacons. And there are currently 2 art beacons in Washington, and one is that water tower and the other is that large Riverwalk sign. So with the I Street Bridge replacement, for example, they'll be needing to relocate the water tank. So part of this plan would possibly be to re-envision, for example, the water tank into a new design as it will be relocated and become a prime entry feature for the city. So during the Washington planning efforts, we began to collaborate with Sacramento through the Sacramento Metropolitan Arts Commission and through the Crocker Museum, and we began to think about a broader vision, and we developed a grant proposal to National Endowment of the Arts called River Crossing. So in July of 2015, NEA awarded $125,000 to this collaboration, and the funds are to create a master plan that visually connects the NBA Arena, Capitol Mall, and the Crocker with new mixed use in the West Sacramento Riverfront District, in Washington District, and along the streetcar route. The culmination of this effort and part of the Our Town River Crossing grant scope is also the installation of an artwork that will communicate the river crossing idea because it will span the river in some way. It will be acquired by both cities, and parts of it will be placed on each side of the river, and it will be conceived of and acquired from a single artist. So the West Sac scope of work for the NEA master plan includes a lot of public engagement to further shape the community's expectations and objectives for this project and for this plan, and to develop a lot of implementation detail, including the exact locations of these pieces, the specific objectives of the pieces to identify acquisition methods and other implementation detail. And when we say specific objectives of the pieces, for example, some pieces you might determine they need to be interactive because you're trying to activate a space, or you might want temporary art in some locations. Also, it can be placed on private buildings, but within the public, like quasi-public private, but still within the public realm. Also, a significant effort that we want to undertake with this planning is to engage community organizations, nonprofits, and possibly even private sector partners to see if there would be ways that they could participate and partner with the city in terms of creating or acquiring these pieces. So the city of Sacramento is ultimately going to including these products into their downtown specific plan. Our products on this side will be enacted in the Washington specific plan. Also, we're developing design standards for Tower Bridge Gateway with the TOD planning grant that we got for the streetcar from FTA. So, and in addition, so we would enact this within those standards. And then we also could amend it into the West Capitol design guidelines if council chose to do that. So as I said, West Sacramento is much farther along than Sacramento, so we'll really be focused on the implementation effort. This is just some graphics I pulled from other cities just to give you a sense of, for example, this is showing what art beacons would look like. They would be very large pieces. They would be, able to be visually experienced and seen from highways and from a long distance away. These are more pedestrian-scaled art icons. For example, in these graphics are sculptures that are installed to reinforce the route in Johannesburg to a major bridge, the Nelson Mandela Bridge. These are wayfinding art pieces in Austin along a commercial corridor. This is a retail streets in a European city. This is a mural in London. It's just another example of how you can do wayfinding in very interesting ways. So they've basically just put a mural in the street to serve as wayfinding. This is an interactive piece in Oakland in an area there where we wanted to draw visitors in to create a more sense of security for the community. This is interactive pieces that, are geared towards children. There's temporary art sculptures. Also, art can be functionally integrated into our benches, into waste receptacles, into bike racks. Can be integrated into murals on the sides of buildings. So also tonight, staff is requesting council approval of the art concept that the project team for the Washington infrastructure is proposing. As you're aware, the infrastructure project is funded by the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Community Grant and the Community Investment Fund. So it's a $4.1 million award to the city in June of 2015. The project was based on, or the grant award was based on improvements that were identified in the Washington Realized document and included $80,000 of state funds programmed for artwork on E Street that's intended to promote bike and pedestrian routes. So just to give, I was wanting to give council a sense to be able to envision the improvements that will be happening in the Washington district. So I don't have a before and after rendering of E Street, but I do have one of F Street. As you can see, this is existing F Street looking west towards 5th. And here is the improvements that will be completed on that street with the scope of work. So if you can imagine, E Street would have similar improvements on it with new lights and better frontage and landscaping. And it will have special features because it is intended to be a special street. We have looked as a project team on the E Street again. It's supposed to be the street that really communicates the council's vision about what this neighborhood is to become. And it would be the street where everyone would go to take photographs. So we really assessed and tried to analyze how can we create this artwork with this budget and this schedule for E Street. And so we looked at the street, and it's very constrained. It has a very narrow right-of-way. So we looked at, given that we need these objects to be visually connected between 5th and 3rd Street, and so we looked at what is the scale that the objects would have to be, and we looked at the narrow area that we have to work in terms of the built environment, and so that was very challenging. And then we turned to this area, and we looked at this intersection, we thought, could we place?
Katie, could you make sure you're using the mic? 'Cause
Oh, I'm
if you're
sorry.
watching at home and you live on E Street, you're like, oh, now that she's talking about exactly what's going to happen in my house, I can't hear her anymore.
So, I can't see one. So we looked at the corner of 3rd and E Street, and we decided, well, could we put something of a scale that would be very visual in that location? And what we determined was that on the north corner, it's cluttered with signals and utility boxes and all kinds of equipment. And if we put the art piece on the south corner, it really looks like it's just part of the CalSTRS commercial development. So as a team, we came up with the concept of doing a sidewalk poem. So the poem would be embedded in the sidewalk. The pedestrian, in order to read the poem, would traverse between 5th Street and 3rd Street. We would do an RFP to acquire the poem. We would target that to local writers, or that's one of the areas that I'm looking for your guidance tonight. And we would define and specify a word count for the poem, and we're proposing to spend about $5,000 on the poem itself. And then pedestrians, in order to read the poem, the design team would hire a graphic designer, and that graphic designer would work with the artist, work with the poet in terms of choosing the font and the spacing and the intervals. And the poet might, for example, want to emphasize certain phrases or words, and that would be incorporated in the design. So the poem would become the art that's on the street. And it would also, it would promote the walkability objective because it has this element of discovery to it, and it's drawing visitors down towards the river. So we would then plan in the future possibly, although the Riverwalk does have a large sign, it's not that visible. So in the future, as part of our planning efforts, we could put a very tall sculpture then on the entry to the Riverwalk on E Street. So I couldn't really find any example of this done in any other cities. This would be very unique to our city and unique in the region. But I did find one in St. Paul where they're just placing an entire poem within a square of a sidewalk, and then they're adding to that over time with different poems. So this recommendation for this art concept in the streetscape, it meets our schedule. It can be done with our budget. Essentially, we would be moving some of our construction budget just into the materials that we're using in the streetscape in the frontage to embed this poem in it. And the project team thinks that it would, be easily woven into other artwork that we have planned in the district, and that it would promote the walkability and other objectives that are identified in the cap and trade grant. And that concludes my presentation.
Other questions? So on the process, then the attachment 3, the structure of the process, and I'm asking this partly because of the request that you didn't cover in your oral presentation about having a council member appointed as a stakeholder, but also just trying to understand what this is intended to accomplish and how much of it is required by the Our Town grant and how much of it is required because we're partnering with a couple of agencies on the other side of the river that are much more into extended stakeholder processes than we are.
There's just a general public engagement process required or stated in our proposal, simply to set community expectations. So we have our own group of consultants, we have our own scope of work, and we can certainly choose to have less or more stakeholders or public engagement or meetings. So the council member as a stakeholder would just simply be representing council's perspective on the project in terms of expectations, and really would just be involved a 2-hour interview possibly with the team.
But the rest of that process, so the other side of the river, a lot of civic engagement is quote-unquote stakeholder-based, right? So, okay, we need to invite somebody from the bicycle advocates, we need to invite somebody from this arts group and that arts group. That's not the typical contours of our civic engagement in the community. It's not principally organization-based. And so often when we end up in joint collaborations with Sacramento, their frame of how engagement happens is either imposed or inadvertently borrowed by us, and it doesn't fit the way that our dialogue happens, and it tends to narrow the kinds of actual perspectives that come out of the community engagement, because most West Sacramentans they're not involved in that sort of thing, and they don't express their opinions that way because we're a small town. They just express them if they want to directly. So I'm trying to understand, just the council member aside just for a second, what are we hoping to get out of the months and months and months of stakeholder engagement, followed by committees, back to stakeholder, followed by committees, and then finally back to the Arts Commission, which is actually our civic engagement tool, and then to the council, whether that's required to do all of that, or whether we're doing it simply to be symmetrical, or whether there's some other reason.
There's no requirement that we have that extensive of a process. Your sense of it, that some of it was defined by the stakeholders on the other side of the river is accurate, and certainly I was calibrating to that in terms of our side and our scope of work. I mean, we do have to, because it is a river crossing project, we're doing it jointly. Certainly, we can refine and modify our public engagement. We have a lot of freedom to do that.
Well, I would certainly encourage doing that. I think we should lean those processes up, both for our own benefit and for members of the public who want to participate, who rarely want to participate 7 times in a row.
Yeah.
But also just because there's an essential function of just integration, and this topic, like many of them, folks come in and they're like, I'm very committed to, what we need is more art that is functional, and yes, we do. We also need more abstract art. We need more art that challenges people. We need more art that, we need all of those things. And my only worry about the way that this process is articulated is like the stakeholder, that kind of engagement happens, then there's some committee that's not anybody that has that's not a decision-making body that forwards it on. We don't get it until it's all the way at the end. Whereas at the earlier stages, I think in general, that kind of community feedback, sort of open feedback, is best deployed when you check in with the policymakers or with things like the Arts Commission early on, rather than at the end, to say, here's what we've heard. And you're getting feedback early on. Okay, yeah, we hear that too. However, that doesn't match up with what our plan is on economic development, or that doesn't match up with where we're going on transit. So there's no point in doing that piece that's all about transit. And so it's about making use of that input in a way that might be meaningful. So I would, if it's possible, I would definitely lean it up, but I'd also find a way earlier in the process, before before we're already at the very end, to reframe and contour that at the policymaker level, for it to be particularly useful, because there are a lot of trade-offs and potential conflicts and issues and with regard to this. The other piece is the artist selection, the May 2017 piece. Artist final selection and interviews. That's not the poem one, or?
No, this would be the NEA grant requires an installation called River Crossing that was described as being, so there is a lot of description of that piece in the NEA grant proposal, which is essentially, it must span the river. It must communicate this concept of river crossing, that we are one community, and that would be done by one artist and conceived of or through the lens of one artist, but pieces of it would be on both sides of the river.
And this uniquely in the time frame is essentially in the passive voice. There's no who's doing the selection and the interviews and all of that.
Well, that would be part. I would expect to bring that detail back to you. Right now, we are on a pretty aggressive. We're asking for an extension on this grant, but it's still a fairly aggressive schedule. So that really hasn't been fully defined. It might involve curators, it might involve panels. I can certainly bring it back to you for guidance.
All right. Well, I mean, if the other portions could be leaned out a little bit, then maybe that's not an inappropriate time for it. But given our experience on this topic, and it's a new one for us, at any kind of scale other than at commercial centers or ironworks or whatever. I think, at least for me, I'd like to avoid the challenges that we've had before of the debates between the artists, the art connoisseurs that want to make sure we have a globally recognized artist, and the debate that debate should be happening here. The globally recognized artist or some artist that's never ever been seen in the region before versus an artist who's indigenous to this city or to the region or what have you, or that's produced something else before that one person might have seen once. I mean, those are real, and they were definitely a challenge in that last project that we did, and so I don't want to just leave it to the art specialists to make that determination without some clear guidance, which I don't think was well heard last time.
What about a proposal where you had, say, 2 curators that developed a list of artists capable with the experience and expertise of doing the work, but they were let's say, 2 or 3 local artists and 2 or 3 that were non-local artists. Would you be interested in a approach like that?
It could work. I mean, I wasn't necessarily trying to come up with the answer tonight, but just to unless it needs to be tonight, but just, it's because we say, and we're right, that art is, critically linked to transit and to economic development and to social justice and to fighting gentrification and activating riverfronts, and then we say, okay, now the selection is all going to be determined by art people. And that doesn't gel with the multi-benefits that we're trying to achieve and the balance that has to be accomplished in that. And so whatever the selection process is, or the criteria, the RFP descriptions, needs to be, heavily deep in that framework, because we're not an art agency. I mean, we are doing art for all of these purposes, and that has to be reflected, including the development of economic development opportunities for local artists, as we've talked about before. And so we just need to figure out what the right framework and process is to ensure that happens, because simply asking our art specialists has not proven to be a good strategy. It's not been proven to be sufficient. It's a solvable thing, and we don't necessarily need to solve it tonight. We just need to make sure that we're going to get to that. We're going to figure out how to do the selection in the way that advances all those objectives. Mr. Ledesma.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing those points up, because it was part of my concern looking at the structure, the timeline for the river crossing. First, I'll start with the fact that it's a fairly exciting proposal. I don't want to lose that. And I know, talking to folks that are on the Crocker board, there's always been this notion that we should be looking for opportunities to kind of have some connectivity of what we're doing on our side and what's happening on the Sacramento side, especially with the arena going up, Crocker's expanding, and on our side, we have the major artwork coming in, and the development of the riverfront and the barn and whatever else. The activation's already occurring. So the notion of this is sort of as a project that kind of fully maybe solidifies that relationship and has an art project is really, to me, exciting. And then you look at the process, and maybe this is what the mayor gravitated to, was that it just looks like it's headed towards a typical committee where it's going to go down this path, and it's not quite going to get. Two things can happen. I think the mayor was going, it could be mired in sort of the art, an artist's framework about what it should be. And there's that aspect. And there's also an aspect that I worry about, that it could get very watered down. The boldness goes away of such a project. So, and which is where I think I want to make sure we can be, as the mayor pointed out, we could be involved early on as a policymaking. Because I don't want to, beyond all the debates that are possible debates the mayor brought up out of this, we've got to, as at least I would like to have a voice towards urging something bold, something different that's unique, that both sides, but that achieves all those things that we're trying to do. And I was worried that the framework that you've laid out in the time frame, which I know, granted, it's a very rushed process, not rushed, but aggressive time frame. Again, I just worry about this group is going off, and we hear from them in May of 17, like, wait, where did this come from? And when there's no connectivity. So those are my comments regarding that, but it is a very, to me, lots of opportunity about what we should be doing along the riverfront. We have a very unique opportunity, and it's already starting to be realized on the waterfront, that it's activated, that even by sports with the River Cats, the barn, which is a community gathering place, which acts like a piece of art. In and of itself, it's a landmark. So we're setting the bar for the nature of it. So I applaud that, and then I'm supportive, and well, I know we have to get to appointing somebody to that. And the idea of F Street, which is a separate project, correct?
Yeah, it's early implementation. So because of the design schedule, when we have to have construction bid sets ready, we have to determine this art or a concept for the art quickly. So this is something the team felt was achievable within our budget and our schedule.
Right.
Certainly, we could pull art out of this project and just do it at a later point.
I don't necessarily think that's what I'm after. Again, I'm for early implementation, because I worry about Washington in and of itself, and I appreciate you putting it back in the master plan that we sort of put together. We had some debate about that when that came up, about how that might evolve as it gets implemented. And so this is a first step into that, right? So let it evolve, and I like the idea of a poem or literary sort of view of Washington. But again, have we talked to the Arts Commission about this, and have they had?
I'm scheduled for their next meeting. So
Okay.
we hadn't developed the concept by June, which was their last meeting. So I'll be presenting to them in September.
And the only part I would say, it's intriguing to me because I've seen the park, it's an urban park in Charlotte. I was just trying to Google some photos of it. Now, that's a very extravagant piece of infrastructure they put in the park, and with all sorts of elements, including audio and the way they landscaped it. But it does try to tell a story through words on the street. And I think that if this has the potential to kind of lay that groundwork. It's kind of what came to mind when you said it. So, but we shouldn't be so married to it that maybe something else comes out of the community, another variance of that. But again, I'm all for sort of a bold sort of step. Well, if we can get some early implementation, I'm forward to it, as long as it's not too contrived or we try to force it in. That would do, and that's why I want to make sure the Arts Commission has an opportunity to weigh in as well. Thank you.
Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm kind of having difficulty kind of seeing how this is art's going to develop out of a committee or, out of this process.
Essentially, what the committee will be doing is developing products that will come back to you for approval. And these will be products that are very crafted to West Sacramento and West Sacramento's needs and desires. So then ultimately, those products are a master plan that get enacted into our planning documents like the Washington specific plan. So
Yeah, but, so concepts like, it's basically going to be two cities, and you've got potentially some type of look of a transition. So you've got these kind of general concepts out there, and, I kind of, going along with what the mayor was talking about, on how to kind of brainstorm and get these kind of the concepts out there initially, because we've got the structure, at least it's laid out to plan this out. But, what does that transition look like? And, I'm just kind of, it's hard for me to see how you're going to get, where you're going to get, where the end result's going to be, without getting to maybe a small group of people that are making a decision on, this is what, eventually you're going to have to decide because it's a joint project on two pieces of art, right? Connecting the cities?
Well, right, so there's the installation. The culmination of the NEA project is this one installation. But in terms of this master plan, it will be realized over 20 years or more. And essentially, the concept for our city is really just to refine the detail of our expectations and for these art pieces and their locations. And so the idea is that they're visually connected, but it's not as though Sacramento will weigh in on our pieces or our installations. They will not, nor will we weigh in on theirs. Simply, we're master planning it together so that they're visually connected in a way that reinforces the streetcar route or, reinforces ped and bike routes.
Yeah, no, I got that. You want to get people to stop and look around, or you want to, maybe have something that kind of evokes, a move to technology or something like that. Because I think the last presentation we saw, was it one in London where they had the video of the footsteps walking on the sidewalk at night through projections, and so it's more like an active art type of thing. But that type of thing, that discussion would still have to happen. But then you're still going to have this connector, which is kind of what this group's about, to connect the two cities with something. There's going to be some common thread between those two, and to get something that's, not so watered down. It doesn't, make a statement or anything.
Mayor Pro Tem Sandine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really excited that we're moving forward and that there's a project in front of us that you described. While I was serving as Vice Chancellor at UC Davis, I had the great responsibility of also serving as chair of and staffing our public arts program. But we had no funding. And so it was very frustrating, and artists would come forward and offer us up pieces. And so the committee, the work we were doing was mostly either accepting or rejecting donated pieces. We had a Chihuly art glass piece, which was wonderful, but then, that cost the university $20,000 or so to install. So that was, there were those kind of decisions we were making and while I was there. I think to the mayor's, some of the questions he's raising, I think for us, perhaps we just need an overlay of kind of when decisions are coming to us and at what point and how they're coming to us. I think the timeline, I totally understand that. I think we need to know when there are deadlines and then how we're weighing in. So perhaps just maybe a simplified timeline. I don't know if that meets your suggestions or proposal, Mr. Mayor, but I think that's probably what maybe we need, and not the kind of details of the meetings of the smaller group. I'm not sure, but I am excited because we actually do, we have funding and we will have funding, and we're planning for funding, and so this is very exciting to me.
Yeah, I'm excited. I just want to get it right. And I don't want to, the other one we ended up like at the last minute, and we had to say yes or no, and we could only say yes, and I don't want to end up in that position again. So just, this committee is pretty much all artists, architects, and developers. And artists, architects, and developers have opinions about how art interacts with transit. They have opinions about what activates, public, walkways and what have you. But they're not experts in that. And so I don't want us to, we are not doing this as a support effort for the region's arts community or arts leadership. We're doing it for a set of reasons specific to our community and to our needs, and we just need to make sure that process is there. So I might even consider stripping the committee out altogether, that the feedback from stakeholders, which I want to get to in a second, ought to come directly to the two cities where we can integrate with the full range of issues that are there. But having said that, even the stakeholder list is all Sacramento. I mean, it's pretty much, it's hardly here at all. It's like UC Davis, CADA, the Kings. I mean, it's hardly West Sacramento in the least, except for us. So this process feels very unnatural to me in sort of how we do business. So if we can, recognizing it's a partnership, and we wrote it down in the Our Town grant, so I'm not suggesting we just make all the decisions next week, but if the extent to which we can bring it closer to that domain, both to get more efficiencies, but also to get it more authentic to the city and to what our needs are, I think would be really, really helpful in that way. The poem, just that I like the idea. As we do more of these things, just keep in mind more and more and more, because we said this is where people can take pictures. People are taking selfies, and so it's a street level, a ground level installation is going to be less likely to generate that sort of activity than something that you can get the piece of art plus the ziggurat or CalSTRS or Tower Bridge in the background. I mean, this is why I was saying as an economic development play, a ground installation would not be the thing that you would do. As an arts play, you might, or just because we don't have enough money to do something vertical. But it's the sort of thing that you don't necessarily think about if you're thinking about it primarily from the perspective of what does the Crocker think and what does the AIA think. But really, what does Diane Richards think about this? And what does David Tilley think about it in a different context, who have no knowledge about art, but can think about how it will advance these other objectives? We need to make sure we get those perspectives in early. And without having them being, we're not doing the engagement, I'll just say this last thing, because I say it every time there's an engagement, so it's not you, Katie, at all, is we often say that we're doing the engagement so we can find out what the community wants. That is not what we're doing community engagement for, because we're not doing polling and focus groups. We're going to hear from maybe 6 or 10 or 25 people. That is not the community. It's not a summative experience. It's an exploratory experience. It's to learn. It's to get different perspectives and different lenses on it. It's not to determine what the community's expectations are. That's oversells what this process is really all about. And once you make that pivot, then you don't need 6 months for it any longer, because you're not trying to get everyone to weigh in on everything. And so, Mr. Ledesma, you were.
No,
Yes, exactly.
you're bringing up, how do we measure, how do we get engagement, and you're just bringing up the getting to the authenticity, how we want people actually, I think, you didn't say this, but what gets people excited today, and I couldn't help but notice watching our young people in the back, when you brought up people take selfies today and they do this, a couple of them started nodding their head, yes, you're right, that's what they do. So, but again, that's sort of the experiential thing you're talking about. Is that, and again, I've seen the literary theme happen, and it was an enormous amount of money that was put into the Green Urban Park in Charlotte. And it could work, but there's I was just looking at photos of it. There's things built in the ground, there's audio places they can go to. We don't have the budget for that for this early implementation. And the mayor's point around, it has to create that excitement, at least that early implementation. It's not something I want to like, okay, we did that, and didn't really relate to anybody, nobody got excited about it. We can't have that. That's why I say we can't close our mind that maybe that's the answer. So I just want to relate that to you because I noticed the young people in the back got excited about that.
All right, so having said all that, my personal view is that we should not be appointing a council member to be a stakeholder that then is giving advice that feeds to a staff level committee. So I know it looks like Sacramento has done that by appointing Councilmember Hanson, but I just don't think that really fits our way of doing business. So was there any other actions that were needed for this evening, or?
I was requesting council approval of the concept of the sidewalk poem or direction to withdraw that art element from the Washington infrastructure project.
All right.
And that item has not gone before the Arts Commission yet, right?
Correct. I'll acknowledge I've had conversations. I believe it will be supported, but I have not taken it into the commission until September. That was the first I could get it on calendar. If the commission were to give different direction or to oppose it, I can certainly determine at that point that there isn't support to move it forward and withdraw it from the design effort at that point.
Thoughts?
I'd like to kind of see it in practice a little bit, because I think the questions that have been brought out about what are folks going to do with it? I've still got a question in my mind. I'd like to maybe just see where this has been done. It sounds like it's unique. Hasn't been done anywhere.
I haven't been able to find any example of, the only example I found was where they take an entire poem and embed it in something. But the notion that you're actually using a poem for walkability to draw a pedestrian down a route, I cannot find any examples. I found examples where they put dance steps, like for the rumba, into the sidewalk and things like that. And you can see that the pedestrians are interacting with that and actually doing that. But I couldn't find, I think this would be unique. It would be something that we've evolved. I think it would be very effective in a quiet way. But certainly it's something that we can reprogram those funds just for other things and then defer that, to a later date.
Okay, I'm kind of ambivalent.
So
Listen to other council.
if we were to ask you to go back to the Arts Commission first, which may have stronger opinions about this issue, it seems like the members of the council are somewhat on the fence on this question. And then based on the commission's advice, you came back to the council. Does that present a time challenge? If you were to return here in the second meeting in September?
So only in that I would have to proceed with the the RFP for the poem, to acquire the poem, and then working with the graphic artist would be delayed, but I believe we are extending the schedule, so I think that can work.
All Why don't we, why don't we, given that we've reached the limits of our expertise on this, if we invite
read that as
the commission that we have, impaneled to give us their best advice in thinking about this, if we give them an opportunity and to give that advice.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thanks, Ms. Jacobson.
Thank you very much.
Still a solid project. I know every time you come on this project, we're working this, I mean, this deep engagement in the arts really is a new line of work for the city, and you've been taking this on with a great amount of passion and creativity and dedication and success. So we really very much appreciate it. Our reward for that is now having to work our way through the jungle of all of these, important issues in order to make sure we get it right. Because we don't have that much money, but we have big aspirations for what we want to accomplish. So thank you. All right, with that, we'll proceed to council calendar. Ms. Berlin?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Here are a few dates that might be of interest to you that are coming up. Next Thursday at the Farmers Market is the last dig-in dinner. And the celebrity host will be the mayor himself. And the chef is Allison Harvey of Lowbrow. And if you would like to attend the dinner, please let Chris Rankin know, and she can get you tickets. And then coming up at the end of September, September 24th, is the McBridge Fest, which is going to be held on the Mike McGowan Bridge from 4 p.m. to dusk. Right now, tentative plans include live music, food trucks, or some sort of food, kids activities, and more information to be provided shortly. And then tentatively, we have set on September 30th, Friday at 10 a.m., is the date for the grand opening of Village Parkway North. When we get confirmation from the contractor that we're good to go on that day, we will let you know.
All right, any questions on the calendar? Seeing none, city manager report.
Well, Mayor and council members, just a couple announcements on staff. Jay Davidson, who's been with the city for 20-plus years as an engineer, several great projects, including McGowan Bridge, and the project manager for Village Parkway North, is moving to City of Lathrop for a higher paying position. Tried to convince him not to, but Jay's last day is tomorrow. As one leaves, another one comes in. Tracy Michaels has rejoined the staff. Tracy is going to be in the Parks Department. Actually, has been working in the Parks Department for the last couple of weeks, and she will head up the Trails Initiative and the update of the Parks Master Plan. As you drove in today, you got the email from our city clerk about the solar project. Sorry for the inconvenience. We'll have one more meeting. I think that will be an issue for parking, but Denix is pledged to have this project completed in mid-September. So for this September 21st meeting, we should have the solar panels up and covered parking. Let's see. At our last meeting, the mayor suggested we monitor the PUC's hearing on the area codes. So staff attended the hearing yesterday in Roseville, getting the notes in the process. We'll come back at the first meeting in September with an update to the council and direction with staff recommendations on the next steps in terms of whether it be an overlay or a separated separation of the area codes for our discussion. We're talking to our IT staff in terms of what the impact would be, and so we'll have more details at our next council meeting. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, Bill Christoph, Councilmember Bill Christoph's retirement party is set for October 17th. We have a staff committee that the city clerk is heading up. They're going to meet shortly, and as details get developed in terms of the date, the times, and so on, we'll pass it on to the council.
Terrific. Any questions for the city manager? City attorney report? Staff directions, members of the council? We have no future agenda item requests, so Mr. Johannesson is moving, and Mayor Pro Tem saying 8 seconds. At the meeting we adjourned. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.